Welcome back to the Why Mindset Matters podcast. I'm Eslana Loa. I'm an author, speaker, resilience mindset coach, and a nurse and a midwife. And I'm also a mother of 4. If this is somehow the first episode of my podcast that you've found, I just want to start with a trigger warning. I do discuss the loss of my teenage daughter, Rylee, to suicide because of bullying. And so I thought I would just start by mentioning that. I want to talk about some experiences that I've had that started a week before we lost Rylee. The week before, I was in Cairns in North Queensland with her younger sister, Mia. We were up there on holidays, and in the evening we went to a night market. And while we were walking around having a look at the stuff there, I came across this blue Ulysses butterfly wing in a glass jar. And I found myself standing in the corner of this market just staring at it. So beautiful, and feeling really, really drawn to buy it for Rylee. We weren't up there for that long, and the holiday had just begun. I didn't have a lot of money on me, and it wasn't cheap, so I didn't buy it. Each night, 3 nights in a row, I found myself back at this market again, standing like a weirdo in the corner of the market, holding this blue Ulysses butterfly wing in a glass jar, just staring at it and feeling so overwhelmed with this. It's hard to describe, just this pressure, this feeling of like, you need to buy this for Rylee. And I knew she was going through some shit. We didn't really have any warning when it came to her suicide. We didn't have any warning or insight into the actual struggles that she was going through. She was a seemingly future-oriented kid, academic excellence, the kindest kid you've ever met, who just seemed to be living her teenage life, and just a beautiful kid. I knew she was going through something because she'd kind of withdrawn a little bit, but not significantly. And so anyway, I ended up buying this butterfly wing in a glass jar. And when I got back, I left it in a gift box with a letter to her on her bed. And I'm going to read you the letter. It said, "Rylee, I bought this for you because I think it's a beautiful metaphor for your life. When you look at it, it's easy to notice how much space the wing takes up, how the glass not only contains the wing, but also puts pressure on it at different parts. The glass is like the world and the butterfly wing is you. The world can feel like a tight, pressured place to exist, and in some environments as you grow, you may feel or be made to feel as though you are too much. But instead of focusing on the glass and the pressure it resembles, look now at the wing. Look how beautiful it is, and how no matter how you turn the glass or from what angle you look at it, it's so beautiful. Look at the intricate beauty and power in its design. That's what I see when I look at you. You have a power in you that you are yet to acknowledge and get to know yourself. But it's there all the same. It's why the world can be an uncomfortable and sometimes cruel place to be, because not everyone has this kind of greatness in them. Some people are like grains of sand in and out of the glass or world without any real impact on it. Some are like small stones that scratch the surface with their existence, but few have the kind of greatness and beauty that means they take up space in this world as intrinsically as the Ulysses butterfly wing in a glass jar, but without damaging the world around it. Having the courage to acknowledge and accept your greatness will make it easier to live with, because until you find your purpose, it can feel like a burden or something you need to deny in order for those around you to feel more comfortable. Don't dim your light to make others more comfortable. Just get good at being intentional about where and who you choose to shine your light on. I love you with all my heart, Mum." I left that on her bed on the Friday night, and 6 days later, she took her life. Within, I think it was about 48 hours of her death, my Apple Watch, the face of my Apple Watch had always been Mickey Mouse. And if you have an Apple Watch, you know you need to go into the Watch app to change the face. And there's a lot of different things that you can change it to. But within 48 hours, I think it was, of her death, my Apple Watch changed to a blue butterfly. And I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe this was some really weird coincidence, and it was like a system update that this is something they were doing now, every 7 days. And then when 7 days passed and it was still a butterfly, I thought maybe 14 or 30. But what ended up happening in the aftermath of her death was every time I would look at my Apple Watch, it was a blue butterfly, a different butterfly every time, but always blue. And the amount of things that happened, I can't even list them all, because the confines of this episode wouldn't facilitate enough time to talk about how many times things like this happened. I'd worked for years in special care nursery, which is one department of a hospital, but I also had been working more recently in the birth suite, completely different departments of the hospital, and both teams of staff sent us a card after she passed away that had one single blue butterfly on the front. I appreciate that a butterfly is often used as a symbol of, someone passing. Like when we would work in birth suite, we knew that baby was going to be deceased or we would put a butterfly on the door so that staff knew not to come in unless it was 100% warranted, and to limit the interactions and interruptions into that space because of the grief associated with that birth. So I know that butterflies have an association with death and grief and so forth, but it was ridiculous. It was like that didn't mean that people intentionally went out and were consciously thinking of that when they were picking a card out of all of the Hallmark cards, all of the cards on offer, and that they could have chosen. So then fast forward, we were looking, for instance, for a house because we couldn't live where she had died. And when we were house hunting and we were having trouble finding the right thing, I had said, we're just going to go away for the weekend because somebody had gifted us a weekend at Gwingana, a beautiful lifestyle retreat that facilitated yoga, meditation and equine therapy. And so we had a weekend away there, and I had said to Kai, we're just going to go away. Like, we haven't found our fuck yes feeling when it comes to a house. And if we push it or rush it, we're just going to end up settling. So we'll go away for the weekend. We're going to manifest the right thing, put it out of our minds and come back and end up finding the right thing, because so far we haven't found it. And so we went away, and the retreat place had these newly built premium suites that they gave us, one of them, but to give us space away from the rest of the people staying there, because they knew we were very, very early in our grief. And we were up there. At that point, we thought the price point we were buying our house at, we would need to renovate and do it up. And I really, really wanted a fireplace, and everything we'd looked at only had a little pot belly. And Kai had said, oh, look at this carpet. I really like this. And I said to him, yeah, this is Sisal. This is the carpet we'll put in when we renovate. And anyway, we left that weekend away going, why didn't we think about this area, Telabudra? Why hadn't we looked at that? And so when we got back from that weekend, we started looking on realestate.com in that area, and we found a couple of houses to go and look at. And he was initially like, oh, I'm just really tired. I don't really feel like it. And I said to him, I'll make a coffee. Like, let's go. I felt really like, let's go. We've got to go now. Even though it wasn't open home on either of those houses, we were just going out of curiosity to do a drive-by. Anyway, we leave and we drive into this street, and as we turn into the street, we come across this property that has a big open house sign. And Kai goes, look, an open house. I said to him, that's not what we're here for. And he goes, I know, but like, we're here. And so we drive to the end of the street and look at the other couple of houses that we were there to see, which we weren't interested in, as it turns out. And as we were coming out of the street, this property, to give you an idea, is 4,220 square meters. So it's quite a big block. But as you come from the other end of the street, you hit the property, you see the house pretty quick, and it just looked like a brick home, like the home we had previously renovated. And we thought, oh, it's just like our old home. We kept driving, and we're like, oh my God, is that a granny flat? Is that still the property? And we're seeing, and he goes, just pull over. And as we jump out of the car with the dog, he goes, imagine if this is just how we like found our home, just by accident. And we've got out, and he stayed outside because he had the puppy with him. And as I've gone inside, I thought the place was packed because there's quite a few cars in the street, but there was no one in there. And I walk in, but as I'm walking in, this big butterfly, like the biggest butterfly I think I've ever seen, just follows me along the garden path. And as I walk in, the agent, who was lovely, he was like really chirpy and, hey, how you going today? And I just felt the tears coming. I looked through these French doors to my left. There's brand new sisal carpet all over this giant lounge room. And the whole wall almost was this beautiful big brick fireplace. And I said to her, we weren't meant to be here. Like, and I'm pointing outside like, what is going on? Like, this is everything we said we wanted. And it was fully renovated. It was everything we wanted. And I ended up out the back with her, talking to her about our story and what had happened and why we were house hunting. And Kai's walked around the back. And again, a butterfly followed him around the back. But he's walked around and seen me and the agent both crying. He's like, oh, for fuck's sake, don't show her all your cards. I'm like, here are all my cards. And I'm just then realizing, what if we can't afford it? Like, what if this is just mean now? Anyway, she's there going, 100%, this is so meant to be your house. The lady who was selling had raised their blended family, apparently, of 9 children with her partner who had got sick and died quite quickly. And so she was in her grief and relative to it. And so anyway, the short of it is she got the phone call about this family that came through who relative and in the thick of grief and just loved the house. And that's what she wanted. She wanted someone to love it the way that they had. But it ended up being the perfect house. There was everything we said we wanted, and we didn't even need to renovate it or touch it. And she was amazing. We bought the house, but in the time between contract and settlement, because it was empty, we went back a couple of times to show family members, and each time we went back, they would comment on, did you notice the butterfly following you through the garden? And they knew about Rylee and the butterflies. And anyway, the house settled. We go in. This lady who's never met us, but obviously knows our story, left a little ceramic angel on the bench, and out of all of the cards that she could have picked in the whole world, just covered in blue butterflies. Things like this kept happening. Rylee didn't want to go to counselling, for instance. Why do we have to keep talking about it? She said in the early days, and didn't want to go in alone, and asked me to come in with her. This was very early days. And as we're sitting on the couch, she goes, Mum, look, and her whole face softened and her little shoulders dropped, and there's all these blue cutout butterflies up the wall. And she just settled in and relaxed into the appointment. But regardless of where we found ourselves, it just kept happening. And I'm not talking about, I know I mentioned in another episode talking about the power of us as human beings and our life force being our energy, and be careful where we put it, because, you can stare at someone across the shop and they look directly at you, and that's how powerful we are at magnetizing stuff or becoming aware of things once we put our energy on them. And that if we decide to buy a Holden or a Mercedes, that's all we see. We suddenly see them when we didn't see them before. I wasn't looking for butterflies. I wasn't. There was nothing about me that had any interest in butterflies. And I truly believe so that whatever it was that made me buy this butterfly in the glass jar was what facilitated so much peace that came from this. I don't even really have words to do it justice. And I did think for a little while, do I even talk about this? Because as much as people enjoy hearing the story, it kind of feels a little bit much. Like, it just feels, I don't know. I don't have words for what it is. And I'm sure that there are people who are more involved in the spiritual realm of our existence who would be probably listening to this and feeling completely validated or going 100%. I fully see all of the connections here and it makes sense to them, where to us it was just overwhelming. Like the capacity to try and comprehend, on top of the trauma we were going through, the ability for my Apple Watch to change to a blue butterfly when I didn't do anything. And these experiences just kept happening. They kept happening everywhere we went, anywhere we were apprehensive to go. We were sitting on the broad water while the kids were in the water for Zali's first birthday that we had after losing Rylee. And Kai was sitting there saying, just so fucking sad as, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And this giant butterfly came and just hovered around his head, and he's just sitting really still, and he said, are you seeing this? Because it just kept being there by his head, and then it floated down and sat on his arm for about a ridiculous amount of time, probably 2 to 3 minutes, just sat on his arm while the two of us sat under this tree just crying. I've never been this close to a butterfly in my life. This is not more of something that was already happening. It was just crazy. Anyway, the girls had started a business, called themselves the Kindness Crew. I'll cover that in another episode, but it was a way of processing their grief. They wanted to spread a message of kindness. We'd lost Rylee to bullying, and they wanted to make an impact and send the message that kindness is a choice. Not always an easy one, we know better than anyone, but a really important one, and one that saves lives, essentially. But they'd started this little business in an attempt to raise funds, because they had said to me, we realise after losing Rylee, life is short and we want to travel and we want to do stuff, but we don't want you to have to pay for it for us. So we want to do this. So they had done it. They were extremely successful. As I said, I'll talk in more depth about the Kindness Crew in another episode, but they'd raised money wanting to travel. For Zali's 13th birthday, February last year, so 2024, we went to Bali. The girls paid for themselves and took spending money, and we're in Bali on this beautiful trip for Zali's birthday where we drank mocktails with drag queens and sang karaoke and had the best time. And we went with a friend and her 17-year-old daughter. And everywhere we went, these butterflies are following us. By this stage, it's just part of our life. Like, it's just, we know that it's Rylee and the butterflies, right? But my friend's daughter said to me at one point, I've never seen so many butterflies. We were somewhere in the garden and there was butterflies around us. And she said, I've never seen so many butterflies in my life. And I said to her, do you know about Rylee and the butterflies? And she said no. And I proceeded to tell her and give her this long list of examples of all these ways that it had, you know, presented in our life since losing Rylee. And she was just there in tears, like it was incredible. And to be processing it in that environment where we'd already spent a good portion of time in Bali, really acknowledging, like, is this Bali, was what she was thinking before she knew about Rylee and the butterflies, because it was so many and everywhere we went. Even right down to, we chartered a boat privately, just our little group, out into the deep blue ocean. I'm talking the dark, deep blue ocean where I'm not getting in the water because that creeps me out. I'm just there to make sure my children don't drown. I'm not the biggest fan of the ocean. So I'm in the boat and the girls are snorkeling. And as they get back in the boat, the man goes, here, let me take a nice photo of the three of you. And as we sit together, me and my girls, this butterfly comes just floating in between us and hanging around our shoulders. And even the Balinese were like, oh my God, like, we are way out in the ocean right now. When do you see a butterfly in the middle of the freaking ocean? And again, by this stage, my friend's daughter knew about Rylee and the butterfly. So we were just like blown away. Not surprised, but blown away. And so this kept happening. Anyway, we get back from Bali, and I had gone to the cafe Rylee used to work at. There's a lovely gentleman in Currumbin here on the Gold Coast. There's a cafe called The Galleon, and Frank owns it. He had given Rylee her first job and had become a big part of our family. And he had been significantly impacted by the loss of Rylee because obviously he lost Rylee too. And so he's a good friend of ours, and I would often go back throughout different parts of my grief. Sometimes it was too much and I'd stay away for a bit, and I hadn't seen him for a while. And so we got back from Bali. But mind you, Bali was the first holiday, proper holiday I had ever been on, because those girls saved the money, paid for themselves, took spending money. I thought I was paying for their meals, but they would sit down at just turning 13 and nearly 15 and look at the menu and decide what they were eating based on what they were willing to spend. I didn't take my children on holidays. I joined them on theirs. And in doing so, it facilitated an opportunity for me to have an experience I'd never had in my life. As a mum and as the person who was paying prior to this, I had the burden of, can I afford this? Are we doing too much? Like, budgeting for holiday, worrying about finances, all of that stuff. And when you're doing that for so many people, it's not the same experience as when you just go on a holiday, whether that's alone or you join other people on their holiday. And that's what this was. I had this beautiful healing experience in Bali that was facilitated by the fact that I wasn't there taking them and facilitating them and their experience. I was joining them on theirs. And so we came back and it was just such a beautiful experience. It was February, and so nearly a year and a half after we had lost her. And when I went back to see Frank, he said to me, he hugged me a bit longer that time and said, I feel like Rylee's letting go. And I explained to him that the week after we got back from Bali, my Apple Watch changed from a blue butterfly back to the Mickey Mouse face that it had been. Not to something else, back to what it was. And I explained that to him, and he said, do you feel like she's letting go? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, does that make you sad? And I said, well, a little bit, but there's no version of her life that I would want on hold because I continue to hurt. And I've always thought of her as in the next room of life. And if I think of life like a game of Mario Brothers, I don't want you stuck on level 2, darling, because I'm in level 1. Like, go win the game. There's no version of her life I want on hold because I continue to hurt, because I'll always hurt. So why should her existence be negatively impacted by that? And I talk about her existence because a part of what I believe that butterfly wing was supposed to facilitate was I was coming up to the 1-year anniversary of her death and I was struggling. I was not okay. And people, I want to say close to me, but not directly close to me. So like relatives of those close to me had started talking about their experience of ayahuasca. And if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it's a plant medicine from overseas that it's a lot. Anyway, you can do your own research because I don't want to do a deep dive into that. You either know or you don't. But essentially it is a plant medicine. It's not something I would have sought out because it works like a hallucinogen that is designed to give you a spiritual experience. I didn't know a lot about it. People were in close proximity to me talking about their experience and I was fascinated. They had mentioned, oh, it would be amazing for you guys at this point in your grief, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, not me. I'm not going to the bush to take hallucinogens. Like I was just closed off to it. I had gone to Fiji and smoked pot there when I was younger and had a terrible time that nearly saw me end up in hospital. I was like, I'm not breaking my brain in the bush doing some hippie shit. Anyway, that was my closed-minded opinion of it at that point. But the more stories that I heard and the closer proximity the people were to me intimately in my life that came with these stories, the more it piqued my curiosity. And they say, because it is such a spiritual experience, that you need to be drawn to it. It's not something that you can view the way I was viewing. It's not like, you go to the bush and just do drugs. It's a whole ceremony thing that is a spiritual experience. Anyway, I was talking to a group of friends that had all done it and all had these amazing experiences. And by this stage, I was really like, I think I want to do this. Like I feel drawn to do this, but I was scared. And I asked a friend, would she do it with me? Because I wasn't going to go do a one-night ceremony and then just somehow feel okay to drive back. Like I was still scared. And so there was a 2-night event. My friend had said, oh yeah, I think I'll do it. And I started reading about this event and it was about the duality of life and death and everything about it spoke to me. But at the end of it, the one emoticon that was used was a blue butterfly. And I remember immediately feeling a shift of, I'm doing this. I don't need anyone to hold my hand. I'm 100% in this. And it turns out that the person who had created the event had created it with me in mind, feeling that she had been spiritually led to create this event because of me. Anyway, I went to book it and it was booked out. And then I let someone know who spoke to her and she changed the venue to be able to accommodate me because she said that it was created for me. I went and did this and I didn't need to be scared. I don't by any means want to be seen to be promoting ayahuasca in particular or anything in particular. As I said, I was a bit apprehensive whether to share this or not, but after listening to somebody else, another Grieving Mother's podcast episode where she spoke about how she had no connection or reason for connection to butterflies before losing her daughter, and then she had all of these experiences, I felt not just validated, but realized that as much as I see this whole unfolding as super weird, and I've learnt to lean into it because it's too many things to be a coincidence. And a ridiculous amount of butterflies. And I do wonder if our association with butterflies and grief or loss is meant to be. I wonder if the whole point of the butterflies being, where do they sit in the food chain? Like, what is eating a butterfly? Are they actually here to facilitate a connection that reaffirms our innermost awareness that there is more than just this life, that there is an afterlife, that there is more, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just finding my voice and sharing my experience. What you do with it is on you. It is actually a really beautiful unfolding, though, when I think about how much I wasn't allowed to walk away, how much my instinct wouldn't let me leave that market that night without this blue butterfly wing in a glass jar. And of course, the butterflies we see all the time aren't blue. When do you ever see a Ulysses butterfly flying around? And I have never in my life before losing Rylee, but my God, I have since. And anyway, I went away and did this experience of ayahuasca, and as scared as I was, I leant into it. And the experience that I had was I don't know if you'd call it God, Source, Rylee, whatever it was, took me through the multiverse and showed me all of it in the most beautiful color, put me at complete peace with her existence, not at peace with the trauma that I had experienced as far as her death, but 100% at peace with her existence, and showed me that just because I cease to breathe doesn't mean I cease to be, and that our ego thinks that this is life. This room we find ourselves in, the interactions we're having, that this is the sum of our life. But in reality, it showed me that this is a tiny blip in the multiverse of everything that there is to experience. And it was literally one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And it's not something that I would go and seek out or do again by any means. And I get now why people had said, you need to be called, you need to feel called to the experience. And as much as I stressed and was scared about how can you just go take something that works like a hallucinogen and then just drive home, you know? And at the end of the ceremony, they played the drums and you just came out of it. It 100% was less of a drug and more of a medicine, and it was 100% a spiritual experience that put me at complete peace to be able to navigate that first anniversary from a place of love and peace. And I came back from it changed completely. I came back filled with so much love and having had this healing experience that I wanted to translate to the girls in Kai. I wanted to bring that home with me. At one point in the ceremony, the person guiding it had put their hands on my head and my shoulder, and I was laying on an air mattress with the eye shield on and just having my experience, and suddenly was being held in this way that just healed this maternal wound that I didn't know I had from the absence of not having a mother in my life, you know. But also I realized that the night she died, nobody held me. Nobody put their arms around me and just fucking held me when I lost my baby. And we had hugged the girls ceaselessly since she had died, but nobody held them that night. Everybody, every emergency service worker was so traumatized by the way that it unfolded that everybody was just in shock. And you know, your instinct now would be to just grab those kids and fucking hold them. But nobody did. And even when the detectives, before they took us off to the hospital, interviewed me, I remember just looking at this man who had been so kind as he had interviewed me. And he just looked so big. And I grabbed his arm and put it around me and made him hug me. But nobody truly held me. And I've never needed to be held, physically held, so badly in my life. And in that moment, as her hand was on my head and on my shoulder, I had this experience of healing that I will never be able to do justice. And whatever needed to happen in my life for me to find myself in that room, to be able to have this spiritual experience and connection with life, even though it's not in the realm that we exist anymore, and to be able to feel this healing that was so powerful. I felt an urgency to come home and translate that to my children and to Kai, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And I came back and I remember sitting with Kai and the girls and saying a lot of things, but also I want the next year to be the year of who is Mia, who is Ali. And they asked me, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't want you to become the girls who lost their sister, or the lower girls, or the girls whose sister took their life. Like, I don't want your childhood defined by the death of your sister. I want to go on a bit of a self-discovery, fact-finding mission about who you are, who it is you want to be, what do you like, what do you not like, and as individuals. And because we had survived until now by just bonding to each other, I didn't want to continue to inadvertently facilitate this codependency and enmeshment that meant we didn't know who they were or we were without each other, and therefore they would be negatively affected as they continued to navigate their life by an inability to see themselves as separate entities and really lean into and love that. And so much beauty came out of that experience. And I know from my own childhood, because I I grew up in an environment with a severely disabled sister, and what happened to us as children, as the other children, was we just got pushed to the side because her needs were so significant that there was no time, room or space or permission to discuss what you thought you wanted or liked or didn't like. You were never asked those questions. You were just one of the pack, and we went there if Katrina could go there. We got there when Katrina was ready. Everything was about, it was kind of became enmeshed with and dictated by the traumatic event that had seen a consequence of severe disability, and that defined so much of our childhood in a way we didn't realize was happening. So as a young adult, I found myself really uncomfortable in situations where I might be asked or it might be required of me to evaluate my stance on things. What did I like? What did I not? I couldn't answer those questions. I'd never been asked that in my life. It wasn't up for discussion, my opinion of things or how I felt about stuff. I just had to kind of go with it. And so to try and find my feet and in time my voice as a young adult following such a traumatic childhood was fucked. It was more difficult than it should have been. And I didn't want that for my girls. And so there's so much beauty that came out of that. And there's no way that I would have gone and done ayahuasca in the fucking bush with a bunch of strangers if I didn't go to Cairns and find this silly fucking butterfly wing in a glass jar, because it facilitated so many beautiful experiences that validated that we weren't crazy. Because as crazy as it seemed or sounded or maybe at times felt, it happened too often and too many times for it not to be what it clearly was. And I truly believe that all of that was some form of connection that I can't do justice to the afterlife or to whatever is going on. And I'm not here to preach anything or try and convince you of anything. I'm just sharing this because after talking to people in person about it, too many people have said 100% you should share that. I'm sitting here on the Gold Coast living my experience in a relative degree of isolation because I haven't had anything like this happen to me before. So there's so many ways that we live out our life and our lived experience unfolds, and we think we're alone in that experience. We think, whether it's good, bad or ugly, the suffering, the beauty, whatever, that this is just happening to me. And I think that what I'm starting to find is that if we really did pull back the curtain and we had the courage to be vulnerable enough to go, hey, I'm going to share this about my experience, that actually, like so many other areas of our life, what we would find is that we're not alone in our experience, that it would probably blow our mind to know how many people are having such a similar experience. And maybe my naivety in thinking, oh, you know, it's sweet or it's nice that we put a butterfly on the door to warn you about death or grief or, you know, sorrow or whatever, or that there's like a symbol for acknowledging that. But maybe I'm naive in thinking that that's all it is. Maybe the symbol is that because of the powerful connection that it actually has to the afterlife. I don't know. I know that for years when I was younger, I would fear death. I would fear it because I would look at the intensity of my experience and all that I am, and I'm so much that how can I cease to be just because my body does or just because I stop breathing? And I struggled with that. And it has 100% the butterfly process, but also ayahuasca put me at complete peace with my existence, with her existence, with that 100% we don't cease to be just because we cease to breathe. And so there wasn't a particular point to this episode other than just to share my experience, because perhaps you've been through something similar. Perhaps you will go through a loss in your life and there will be a symbolic nature of connection that validates your experience or keeps you feeling connected to that person. But none of it has made me sad. If anything, it has probably helped strengthen me to be able to do everything that has been necessary to become this person today, to be able to stand in the rubble of my life and a life that I no longer even recognized, and just begin to start putting the pieces of my shattered heart back together, not in a way that has any semblance to my life before, but in a really beautiful way, in a way that I'm so proud of and that I love every day, my life and everyone in it. And I'm so grateful to still be here. So thank you for listening to this episode of Rylee and the Butterflies and the Why Mindset Matters podcast. I'm Eslana Loa. You can follow me on Instagram at Resilience Mindset Coach. Thank you, as I keep saying, for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the future episodes of Why Mindset Matters.